All right, episode 5 of the Apple TV Plus series Slow Horses is now here, meaning we only have one episode left in this first season. Last week's episode felt a bit like filler to me, but how does this week's compare? After the fiasco at Slough House and the botched rescue plan for Hassan, the slow horses must disappear to avoid capture by MI5. While some of the slow horses try to evade capture, Lamb and River head to the park to outwit Taverner. And because each episode is so short, my non-spoiler review will also be fairly short. And then I'll dive into spoilers, but I'm going to give you plenty of warning before doing so that you can bounce if you don't want all the details. We saw in episode 4, after the kidnappers behead the undercover MI5 agent Black and take off with Hassan, that Taverner has sicked the dogs on the slow horses with the plan to pin the entire botched kidnapping on them, even though it was she who orchestrated the whole operation. Minus, of course, Black losing his noggin. We also watch the kidnappers traveling in a van with Hassan, and Curly is getting increasingly agitated. We learn that he's gone rogue from the plan, and he intends on following through with executing Hassan, despite the protests from the other two kidnappers. So when episode 5 picks up, the slow horses are working to meet at Blake's grave as they had planned. Now, while there's a bit of tension here, some unexpected comedy comes in the form of Gary Oldman's very inspiring speech to the slow horses. I mean, it's not quite what you may expect, but it is humorous. Some really good urgency is building with the kidnappers in the van, too. They encounter some complications that really create some good anxiety for the narrative. And there are a few scenes that almost had me holding my breath because the situation felt like it was on the razor's edge, threatening to slip and then become very treacherous, but with the equal likelihood that all would turn out fairly okay. I mean, I liked this feeling of suspense within the episode. For the relatively short runtime of this episode, there's an incredible amount of focus given to a lot of the characters. And I appreciate that we get to see some of the slow horses working together. But good gravy, Roddy, I mean, gosh, he's very off-putting as a character. I know he's meant to be abrasive, so the acting is spot on and it's effective. And while most of the slow horses are working one angle while simultaneously trying to not get caught by the dogs, we get to see Cartwright and Lamb go off in a different direction that's sure to become entertaining. Gary Oldman once again gets to shine in this episode, making a very unlikable character somehow captivating and even endearing. When the episode concludes, everything feels like it's at a sort of breaking point, which is a great spot to catapult us into the final episode. So this penultimate episode for season 1 really ratchets up the tension and anxiety, but putting many of our characters into precarious situations. The acting continues to be wonderful, and the scheming just continues to pile on the pressure, leading to showdowns between all sorts of the players. Now the show continues to be beautifully shot, capturing some amazing cinematography that is very British in its execution. And there are a few story conveniences in this episode to help move the narrative along, so you do need to suspend a bit of disbelief when it comes to these. The pace of this episode is tight and it's urgent, but it also gives us small moments here and there to let the guard down before cranking up the tension again. There's no sex or nudity, but there's a ton of profanity and some brutal violence. I give episode 5 of Slow Horses 4 out of 5 couches. Alright, so now I'm going to dive into some spoilers for this episode. So if you don't want to hear any of them, I really appreciate you couching with me, and I do hope that you'll come back, maybe to share some of your thoughts on this episode once you've seen it. Alright, so let's just start with the slow horses meeting at Blake's grave. That inspirational speech that Lamb gives feels like it might be his final goodbye. It's him making sure he lets his team know how he really feels in case he's either killed or never allowed to speak to them again. But in true Lamb fashion, he's brutally insulting to them after this very dramatic introduction and then a pregnant pause. I laughed out loud at this, and I love how fitting it was for his character. We even get the questioning from Cartwright when the two are alone, asking if it was just meant to spur them into action. But then River realizes it wasn't. I mean, Lamb's just a terrible person for the most part. When the slow horses get to the cafe to wait, I love that we get these continued small teases into Standish's past. It's so mysterious, and the whole team knows that her husband killed himself. But again, no info is really ever shared on what that is, so we're left to wonder what actually happened. And this is especially true when we have Taverner making all of those vague threats to Lamb about Standish going down for treason. I mean, it feels like there's a very intriguing and complex story behind this, so I'm hoping that we eventually get more answers. This episode probably features the best use of the Proclaimer's "I'm gonna be 500 miles," ever. And the timing and attitude that Oldman uses in the scene where he pulls up to the park in the stolen Land Rover, it's simply awesome. I love his cavalier attitude that he portrays. His give a damn is most certainly broken, and his confidence is in top form when he really believes that he's the smartest person in the room, or the car, as it were, which he might actually be. But just to watch him sing along, nonchalantly roll down the window to make a demand and then roll it back up to continue singing, that was absolute gold. It was funny, but it's also engaging and tense. And I love how the super loud music is the distraction that he wants it to be, creating this huge scene and then upping the annoyance of everybody around, which then allows River to sneak in unnoticed. Now, sure, we do have to suspend a little disbelief here, but it's minor and it helps to keep the show progressing. Then once Lamb is inside, the conversation that he has with Taverner once again is tense and very enjoyable. I love the threats that go back and forth between the two. Each has immense dirt on the other, but only one is seemingly in the true driver's seat. And despite what Taverner believes, it's not her. As River sneaks into the park and is rifling through Webb's files looking for the photo of Taverner in black, the suspense, I thought it was wonderful because of how the urgency is created by all of the dogs searching the building. I think some of it may be a bit unrealistic in how the searching is actually carried out, especially if they believe an intruder is in the building. But the way it's executed allows for faster storytelling, which then maintains the anxiety. Even the showdown between Taverner and Lamb and River is a bit unrealistic. I would assume that if Duffy suspects that Lamb and River are planning something, his first instinct would be go directly to Taverner's office. But that doesn't happen. I know it's a plot convenience and why it's there, but if you let it, it could become a point of distraction. So I'm choosing to overlook it for the greater urgency of the narrative. So the kidnapper scenes in the van with Hassan are probably the tensest parts of this episode. We've seen the fighting that's gone on between the three because Curly just wants to finish off Hassan, but the other two, they certainly don't want to go down that path. As they're driving along, the arguing is still continuing, but the complication of now needing gas, I thought was wonderful. All three of the kidnappers are just splashed with blood, so they can't fill up the tank without all kinds of potential issues. Plus, there's the risk of the CCTV cameras, so the only choice they feel they have is to unbound Hassan, put a hoodie on him, and then have him fill up the tank. Now, the scene where as he's filling up the van and then the woman comes over to ask for assistance becomes really tense because she can tell something is off, and I think her hackles are raised. And I love Curly's quick thinking and him blaming a bit of Hassan's awkwardness on his upcoming wedding. Now, as Hassan was fiddling with the gas cap, I thought maybe he had done something that would warn the woman, but I rewatched it a few times and I don't think there was actually any warning that was given. But what about when Hassan goes to pay and the news is on the TV showing not only pictures of him, but his family? I thought for sure something bad was really about to happen. Now, it mildly bothered me that the attendant kept asking him which pump number when it was very clear that there was the van at the pump and then the only other vehicle was just pulling up. That felt more like a forced sense of tension rather than being naturally occurring. And the scene was tense enough with Hassan just going up to pay and the TV showing footage about it. When we get to the scene where Curly says that the only way Hassan will get to go with him is if he can make them laugh, that became so incredibly uneasy. I love that Hassan gets a chance to speak and we get a return to how we first met him as that reluctant comedian. But good gravy, what we get is really funny and then horrifyingly violent. The look that Curly has as he begins to laugh is maniacal and unhinged. His eyes go wide and they're gleaming with insanity. And while it was abrupt, I don't think it was too shocking that he shoots one of the other kidnappers. That was an awesome scene and it was certainly anxiety-filled. Okay, so I think that about wraps up episode 5. How do you think the season is going to finish up? Will we get a conclusion to the story where Hassan is either rescued or killed? Or do you think the cat and mouse of Slough House with the park is going to continue? I don't know what I'm hoping for at the moment, other than a really compelling finale. But let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.